Hey, you guys. Obviously, I'm not here today, so I just want to walk through the last couple things we're going to do before you guys are free for spring break. So, obviously, you can see my screen being shared with you. And let's go ahead and get going. At this point, hopefully, the sub has been able to um, give you guys the outline of the notes today. The first thing that would be good to do is to go ahead and cross off day 19 notes and put day 20 notes. That's going to be the first thing you do. Today we're going to be covering just kind of the way the war wrapped up. The video you guys watch alluded to this, but I want to kind of flesh out the peace treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, the Paris Peace Conference a little bit, because that actually really sets the stage for what comes with World War II. So those are going to be the things that we hit today. And then at the end, you guys are actually going to be looking at a few political cartoons. We're going to do it a little bit similar to the way we did that secondary source comparison, but this time it'll be with political cartoons showing kind of a different idea of how things unfolded, if you will. So here we go. We're going to get started. What we're going to do is look at the League of Nations. Part of the reason we need to do this is because whether or not you know this, the League was something created that was the brainchild of Wilson, President Wilson, but it actually did not get passed. We did not join the League of Nations. And so this is actually a really interesting moment as we think about like the powers of government in the United States, the system that we have, the structure of government that we have. And even though the League of Nations was this idealistic kind of like covenant that all these countries would come in to help each other, there were some problems with it that kind of is the reason why it didn't get passed. So the question we want to answer today is, what are the limits on our global involvement and why are they there? Now, I like this quote because I think this is actually really true for us as a nation. This is from President Woodrow Wilson, and he said, "Sometimes people call me an idealist. Well, that is the way I know I am an American. America is the only idealist nation in the world." And it's really interesting because you think about, the thing, the values that we have, the freedoms we have, the liberties we have, the idea of what America is. Do we live up to it? We have failed many, many times, but does that mean that it's bad to be an idealist about what we would like to see happen? Is it better to be idealist or is it not? There's problems with both. But what we're going to do here, I'm going to give you this overview, and then you're going to be getting into those political cartoons. So the first thing that kind of to allude you to these political cartoons is, here's one. And actually, I like this idealistic quote because it really does show this political cartoon really leans into that, right? You can see Woodrow Wilson there. He has this bowl of bubbles. I don't know what it is, but he is blowing bubbles, and it's like a bowl of idealism. And he is blowing this bubble called the League of Nations. Now, think about bubbles and right? Like they go away right away, they pop. And usually the bigger ones might hang for a while, but those ones also pop pretty dramatically. So what you're going to be doing with this political cartoons is really looking at this and kind of looking at what we see, that what it symbolizes, what it's trying to communicate, and the message of it, why they created it. What kind of perspective does this portray, either about a person or a system or a document? Who would agree or disagree with it? And what is the limitation of this? What is something that this political cartoon doesn't really help you answer? So that will be coming for you, but just not quite yet. To kind of give you an outline of American intervention during World War I, we really start to perk our ears when we see the Lusitania get hit by those German U-boats in May 1915. Over the course, like actually before the war started and essentially till the end of the war, we had been sending aid and arms to our allies. We were supporting the British, the French, and we had been actually really been able to get out of an economic slump and boom that way. The war officially started in 1914, but we had been sending supplies for a couple of years before that. In February 1917, Germany brazenly declares unconditional, unrestricted submarine warfare. And by March, literally the next month, you get that Zimmerman telegram that was sent from Germany to the Mexicans offering up, a bunch of territory if they were to fight with the Germans. By the following month, literally right after that, U.S. Congress approved a resolution to declare war on Germany. Woodrow Wilson got in front of Congress, asked for a declaration of war. Congress said yes, and we are officially in the fighting by April 1917. But at that point, the war had been going on for about 3 years. So again, there's this kind of like, we're kind of detached, at least as far as like the reality of war when our guys officially went over. We end up, like, the war obviously goes on. It only takes about a year before Russia's obviously dropped out by this point. Germany and Austria-Hungary, they just cannot maintain the numbers that they had anymore, especially now that they are getting flooded with American soldiers. And so the war ends up ending on November 11th, 1918. They were very poetic in the way that they did this. They wanted it at 11 o'clock on the 11th day at the 11th hour, and they call the armistice. Now, all around the world, people are celebrating. Here's some different pictures from Philadelphia. This is in New York City. You can see the ex-Kaiser. New York especially is going to be such a hub of a diverse group of immigrants. And so that's going to be something that could cause some tension, but you can see there. London, obviously, the streets are just absolutely filled. To have this kind of experience, I hope we never have to go through something like that, but to kind of had to be on that side of it and for the end of a 4-year-long war be over had to just be incredible. This is in Washington, D.C. People were flooding the White House. It was everywhere. This is Trafalgar Square in London as well. This is in Paris. Literally, like, it was just one global party. Now, the armistice, they actually signed it in this railway car in Paris. And you can see here the different delegates that were there. And Germany, obviously, the delegates from Germany were there. You have the delegates from France that were there. And it's actually really crazy. I'm going to just kind of show you a snippet of this. This is footage. Because when World War II officially started and Hitler invaded and took over Paris pretty immediately, about 1940. Remember, he was so ticked off by the repercussions of World War I and what happened for Germany after it that he made it a huge deal when he ended up taking over Paris. And they kind of used Paris as their playground, the Germans did, but he wanted it to be a spectacle. And so he brought his videographer, essentially. They found the exact same rail car that was used for the peace treaty after World War I to watch the French and have the French sign over authority and all of those things to Germany. So you can see here, like I said, this is the footage. Again, this like hearkening, kind of going back to the World War I period. Let me go ahead and you can see, like I said, they're in the rail car there. He's having the French general sign over, like all of those different things. So you can see I have a couple pictures as well. But it is something that is part of the legacy. Now, the crazy thing is that after World War II, or like when World War II was ending and it was clear that the Germans were going to lose, Hitler, I've like looked at this. It's like, oh my gosh, when I go to Paris, I want to go to this rail car. When the writing was on the wall for Germany, Hitler did not want that to happen to him again, where he's going to be humiliated and they're going to get the rail car back and then he's going to sign over his, surrender. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up taking the rail car and having it disassembled and taken out to the forest and like buried in the ground so that they would not be able to find it or see it or whatever and make him sign his surrender in that rail car. So I guess he got the last word in that, but I think they have a replica now if you were to go to Paris. But anyway. Okay, the Paris Peace Conference, the war's over. All of these delegates from all over the world come to Paris to determine what is the new world order going to be. They try and figure out now, man, that look at the boundaries, look at the geography, what should happen in Europe. Now, the one major power totally excluded from the conversation was Germany. They had no say in what was going to be decided for them as a nation. The other country that was missing, hopefully you guys are this is making sense to you if you think about what happened during the war, but Russia was gone, right? Russia was also not there because they were still going through their revolution. Now, the treaty for Germany was called the Treaty of Versailles, and I think eventually I'll show you kind of the terms of that. But the four major powers that had the biggest seat, you can see a picture of them right here. I think this guy he's a whole vibe. The big four is what they're called. You have David Lloyd George of Britain. He kind of takes on the role of mediator. I mean, the British are kind of removed from obviously mainland Europe. They're going to lose a ton of guys in the Battle of the Somme. But he's going to play more of that mediator role. The French are pissed. George Clemenceau of France, he wants revenge. He wants compensation. He wants Germany to be contained. It is just a total punishment mine for him. Woodrow Wilson, if you haven't caught on, he's the idealist. He believes in national self-determination, which means every country should be their own country without being colonized or that kind of thing. And he really wants to be the kind of the author that allows for this lasting peace in the world. Now, remember, they have no idea that World War II is coming. And so they really do think that when they come to this meeting, they're able to really solidify and make sure nothing like this happens again. The last one is Vittorio Orlando of Italy. He's really just going to play a minor role, though. So we don't really talk about him much. Now, this is Versailles. Versailles is right outside of Paris, and it was the huge mansion palace built by Louis XVI. He's the one who ultimately got his head chopped off with good old Marie Antoinette. And this is his gardens. It's absolutely just the most ornate, beautiful thing you've ever seen. Now this is the Hall of Mirrors. The Hall of Mirrors is going to be, if you ever go to Versailles, you will go through the Hall of Mirrors. It's incredible. It's ornate. It's definitely next level. But here's some of the pictures of the meeting proceedings. And again, so many countries represented here. If we were to look at what was actually outlined in the Treaty of Versailles, you can kind of see what kind of happens to Germany here. Number one, there are some pretty crucial terms that really make Germany pay for what they did. Article 320 or 231, you can see that there in your notes. That's kind of the salt in the wound. It's one thing to have to pay things back. It's one thing to have to kind of make up for what you did. But this is purely about just taking on the responsibility. This was called the War Guilt Clause. They were supposed to be it was our fault. We did it. We're the perpetrators. We're the problem. Now, also in that treaty, Germany was not allowed to have an air force or a navy. They had to shrink their army to about 100,000 guys, which is literally nothing. Not only that, but they lost some land. You can see the Rhine River right here is going to be some land that they lost. They also lost some land over here. And not only that, but they had $65 billion that they had to pay. Those are called reparations. And if we were to, I don't know how accurate this is, but in theory, that's impossible, right? There's literally no way a country can do that. If we were to translate that to today, that is about $785 billion. Quote unquote, I was kind of looking this up, and they say that their final reparations or payments, quote unquote, were made in 2010, but I don't even know what that really would look like. But this quote is really interesting, and this kind of goes back to why you don't give harsh treaties and peace negotiations. It says, for most of the modern era, the process of ending wars involved representatives of the warring nations sitting down at a table and arranging some sort of peace. Depending on the duration, the intensity, and the issues over which the war was fought, peace settlements could range from harsh to generous. An unspoken but generally understood assumption was that the warring parties would be likely to meet on the battlefield again, with the results quite possibly reversed. Thus, over harsh settlements were rare. It's a pretty bad idea, right? You want to make sure that you know that like you're taking care of business in the right way, because otherwise the tables could be turned. Here's just a picture of reparations being sent back to France. Obviously, everything's devastated. And so it's not just France, though. Germany is going to have to figure it out as well. So Wilson is going to come to this meeting, and he is going to set down what he thinks is the best plan for world peace. And he does it with what's called his 14 points. So I'm going to show you this clip, and this clip is going to talk through and answer those questions. So go ahead and answer these questions as you hear them.
14 points. On January 8th, 1918, President Woodrow Wilson delivered his famous 14-point speech, where he outlined a plan to end World War I and secure world peace. When the war broke out in 1914, Wilson adopted a policy of neutrality, with no intention of involving the U.S. in a foreign war. But the U.S. couldn't remain isolated for long. In January 1917, British intelligence intercepted and decoded a message known as the Zimmerman Telegram, in which Germany asked Mexico to ally with them against the United States. Then, on February 1st of the same year, Germany announced unrestricted submarine warfare and started sinking merchant and passenger ships with U.S. citizens on board, something they had agreed not to do after sinking the Lusitania in 1915. The Lusitania, a British ocean liner, was torpedoed without warning, leading to the deaths of over 1,100 people, including 128 Americans. This was the final straw. On April 2nd, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson went before a joint session of Congress to request a declaration of war against Germany. Just 2 days later, on April 4th, Congress declared war. The war was brutal and expensive. In a little under 2 years of fighting, the U.S. had spent $32 billion and lost over 116,000 men. Wilson wanted the war to end, but when announcing his 14 points in January of 1918, Wilson didn't just want to end the war to protect America, he hoped to prevent wars from ever happening again. So together with his advisor and friend, Colonel Edward M. House, President Wilson organized a group of 150 political and social scientists to study Allied and American policy all over the globe, collecting nearly 2,000 reports and 1,200 maps. This would inform the idealistic 14 points, which would address causes of the World War and also propose solutions to ensure world peace in the future through policy and negotiations. 8 of the 14 points were aimed at resolving specific territorial issues among the countries involved in combat, and securing borders and statehood for Italy, the Turkish part of the Ottoman Empire, Poland, and Austria-Hungary. 5 points covered general principles for a peaceful world: open treaties and agreements, freedom of the seas, free trade, reduction of armaments, and adjustment of colonial claims to land. These were all based on the principles of self-determination, the idea that nations should have the right to govern themselves without interference from other countries. The 14th and most influential point proposed that countries form an alliance to guarantee the political independence and territorial integrity of great and small states alike. The 14-point speech reflected a tradition of diplomatic idealism that would come to define Wilson's presidency. But how did that idealism translate into action? Well, most of Wilson's points were never fully realized, but one point in particular would have a big impact on the Treaty of Versailles and the end of World War I. When the Allies met in Versailles to create a treaty to end the war, they were less interested in Wilson's idealistic vision and more interested in regaining what they had lost and punishing Germany. To Wilson's disappointment, the points were barely integrated, and only to the benefit of the Allies. Most of them weren't actually adopted or honored by anyone after the treaty was signed. However, the 14th point was incorporated: the creation of a world organization providing collective security. This would later be known as the League of Nations. Ironically, despite a campaign from Wilson, the US never actually joined the League of Nations. Wilson foreshadowed that without American membership in the League, there would be another world war within a generation. Sure enough, World War II would break out just 20 years later.
Okay, so go ahead and take a minute here. The sub is going to pause this video real quick and go ahead and chat with each other about what answers you got for these questions. Okay, so hopefully the sub has started playing it again. You guys got some time. We looked at what the goal was, what self-determination is, all of these different things. So kind of going along with the last couple ones there, the League of Nations was part of the 14th point, and the problem, it's known as Article 10, the problem with this League of Nations, well, we'll start with the purpose. It was to try and make sure that peace was secure, administer former colonies of the defeated powers as mandates, and foster general disarmament, meaning like putting down of weapons. It also sought to preserve territorial integrity, meaning like allow these countries to maintain the territory that they have, and something called collective security. So, we all are in this pact together. We have each other's back in this. Now, the part of this, it's the League of Nations, but it's called a covenant, and every single part of the treaty, every single participant had to sign this and say that you are accepting and becoming part of this league. Now, a covenant is really strong language. If you think about kind of like, it's actually a biblical term that was between God and Israel, and God made a covenant with Israel, and it was something that, if it was broken, death would be the result, or kind of like the punishment of a broken covenant. And so a covenant was something that like you were sold into. And that is part of what this league was trying to create to ensure this collective security. Now, again, the aftermath of Versailles, and we're going to kind of get to this, but the United States actually ended up rejecting the League of Nations. And this is like, if you think about Woodrow Wilson, this is pretty embarrassing because this is his brainchild and it was not accepted. So the US rejects it. Germany is going to feel stabbed in the back. This is actually a rally after it happened, as the Germans are looking to kind of like rally together in their misery, I guess you could say, and kind of look for a new leader. And this is that protest of, what they had been dealt, huge reparations, that kind of thing. So kind of the question then is, what went wrong for Wilson? Yes, he's idealistic. I'd probably argue he's ahead of his time, at least in what he is trying to create and have happen. But what actually was the problem? Why was he unable to, get the League of Nations, something that was implemented in the United States? So here's where the political cartoons are going to come in. You are going to pair up with the person sitting next to you, and there's 4 cartoons. There's 2 that are green colored and 2 that are pink colored. And you're going to go through the questions, and you're going to do one. You'll see 2 columns on the worksheet. One column is where you'll analyze one of the primaries or one of the political cartoons. The other one is where you do the second political cartoon. And then don't forget to flip over on the back, and you're going to make some comparing and contrasting. And really the goal of this is to answer the question of, what are our limits? Why are we not just like willing to get into this League of Nations? What is the problem with this League of Nations that kind of show what our limits on global involvement are? So the sub is going to pause this here. Please do not put right on these political cartoons. They are class copies. You'll be turning them back in at the end of the period. But she's going to hand that out for you, or he is going to hand that out for you. And Um, they're going to pause this video and then we're going to circle back at the end and I'm going to go through a couple similarities and differences depending on which ones you looked at. So pausing of the video. Okay, hopefully at this point you have analyzed the political cartoons. So let's kind of talk about some of the similarities and differences. Oh, this is dovetailing. Shoot. Hopefully the sub showed you these pictures here. I'll put it at the beginning as well, but dovetailing means they go together like this. Okay, so if you had the green, some of the basic similarities. Similarity number one is that they just don't fit, whether it's two boards trying to be dovetailed together or two papers on a throne. They cannot fit together. There's not enough room. They don't like align together. They're two different systems. They're two different documents. And to have one would be the kind of like it would supersede the other. You can't have shared power there. And so they're two different systems. They're just not going to work together. Now, a key difference between these two, well, there's a number of more similarities that I probably didn't hit. Definitely not. But the focus is pretty different. And you kind of look at who the problem is. The problem on the left side, the one with Wilson, is Wilson. He's the one trying to like put together these two things that don't fit. Whereas in the other political cartoon, it's the Covenant, the League of Nations. That's the one that's kind of the aggressor, if you will, in the political cartoon. So you can see there like the connection or the illusion or the connotation of who the actual problem is really two different places. One is way more specific to Wilson himself. The other is more about just the league. And so you could kind of make that difference. If you had the two that had the wedding versus this like sneaking through the chamber, if you will, similarities, both are kind of sneaky. One is that on the, with the wedding, it was happening without everyone being aware that it was going on, pretty key people aware that a wedding was going on. And they were not informed of this information. Kind of showing the other one is where, Wilson is just trying to sneak out, right? And they weren't invited or they weren't given information. The balance, you can see there's not a lot of balance. The Senate is basically being removed from the conversation. And also it's the like kind of awareness comes at just the right moment, whether the Senate is coming in and stopping it or whether they're like just aware of what's going on before Wilson's able to sneak out of the door. The difference is the focus again. The blame actually goes to Uncle Sam versus Wilson on the second one. Oh, the other one, I missed this, but like they're both sweating. I don't know if you caught that. The second one, though, shows they're both, the Senate and the House, is being hoodwinked into not realizing like what is happening until the last moment. So again, the kind of blame, the awareness of what's going on, the blame is different. And then the awareness and how the awareness happens is different as well. So that's some basic similarities and differences that you might have gotten. Once you're done with that, you're going to turn that into the sub, and I hope you guys have a great spring break. There's no homework. Just make sure that you get some rest, get some sunshine, eat good food, enjoy your time off. All right, see you guys later.